Here we go. Actually recording. Can't believe it. It's been so long. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Groovy Sleep Train. It's been a very long time since I've done a sit down video like this. I've not used my proper camera in like a year, maybe. I can't even remember how to use it. Hopefully this is gonna turn out looking okay. This video is a video I've been making for a very long time, and it is a list of my 7 favourite EPs. But before I get into that, I just wanted to say that I've read your comments about having ad breaks in the middle of videos being really frustrating because you're trying to relax, go to sleep, and then all of a sudden you get an advert in between. Now, I need to have adverts on my videos because I rely on that very, very small amount of income that it makes. I'm sure I only get a transfer from Google like once every 3-4 months, and it's always the bare minimum, but even so, I do rely on that. So I do need to have the adverts, one at the beginning, one at the end of the video, and one in the middle. But to make it as easy as possible for you, I'm going to put that ad break in the middle in now before the video properly gets started, so you've got a time to settle down and relax for the rest of the video. I hope this is okay, and I feel like this is the best way to do it, is that I just give you a warning before it comes in. So it's gonna come in now. So this EP video, I have been making it in my mind for about 5 years, and I know there's some of you out there that have been very, very patiently waiting for me to do this EP's video, and honestly it's taken me a long time because I'm always changing it, the list. I'm always adding things to it. It's usually adding things, to be honest, or realising sometimes that something I thought was an EP turns out it wasn't an EP, and then I'm like, well, it's not going to be on the list anymore. But for anybody who doesn't know what an EP is, it's kind of like an album, but it usually has a lot less tracks on it, anywhere from like 3 to maybe 8 or so. Sometimes that's quite a big EP though, if something had like 8 to 10 tracks. And there's a lot of different reasons why a band or an artist makes an EP. It can be that they're at the beginning of their career and they need to make record a few songs to sort of showcase who they are in order to get, interest for gigs or labels or, media interest, whatever it may be. And sometimes bands can make an EP like in between 2 albums. This is sometimes for marketing reasons. Sometimes it's because the label wants them to not put those tracks that they've made on a full album, but they want it to be on an EP because they think it'll be more successful that way. Or sometimes it's a way for the band to keep themselves creative when they're sort of in between 2 albums, and they've made some songs, but they're like, the theme of those songs might not be correct for their upcoming album, but they don't want that music to just, disappear into the ether and not exist, or, only end up on B-sides or something. So I've got 7 to show you. I've got my trusty notebook with my notes in it. These notes are really all over the place, so you're gonna have to be patient with me while I go through them. So I've researched some of these a bit more so that there's a bit of background as to like what the EP is, why it has come to be, and then I've also talk about what I like about it and also how it came to be a part of my life, because that's what I feel like music is. It becomes a part of your life. So the first one I'm going to start with is a record, and this is by a band called Do Nothing. And the EP is called $0 Bill. It's a 12-inch and it has 5 tracks on it. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this band. So, they're from Nottingham, which is in the sort of middle area of England. They're quite new within the past couple of years. They don't have an album yet. They've not released a debut album, and I don't know when that will be coming, but this is like the first sort of EP that they've created. They have a couple of more songs that are on Spotify, but they are kind of like singles, it's just like the one song. This is the only one where there is multiple tracks, so I would categorise this as an EP, showcasing, a new band. I first heard about them on BBC Radio 6 Music, and it was their song called LeBron James, which is a great song. It's amazing, and maybe I love it so much because it was the first song that got me into them that I first heard, but it is a great song. So if you were going to just check them out on Spotify and listen to one song, that would be the one that I would say you should listen to, because it's a good gateway into their music. So what else on my notes? Oh yeah, so apparently they're amazing live, and that's where it's really at, and that's how they've gotten a lot of their sort of fan following is from gigs, and I just think that's so cool. Like I've seen a video of them playing live, I think in, what's it called, Maida Vale? BBC Radio 6 Maida Vale. If I mention anything, I'll leave it linked below, so I'll leave that linked below if you want to watch it. But it's like Maida Vale, it's kind of like a studio set up, and then they play songs in there, and it's recorded. So it's not quite like a gig because it's like a studio session. So apparently they're amazing live because the singer has real energy about him. I read an interview with him on Enemy where he says he he takes inspiration from stand-up comedians who sort of try and enrage the audience to feel angry towards them, but in the end they end up enjoying the show. This kind of persona where I guess like the audience is the enemy in a way. Those aren't his words, those are mine. And so he kind of goes between these kind of personas, and he says he was really influenced by LCD Sound System and Talking Heads. And if you think about Dave Burns in Talking Heads, he's got a very, very big physical energy, he dances a lot. Whereas in LCD Sound System, I think the front man, I can't remember his name, he has quite a still and very relaxed energy. So I wonder whether the Do Nothing guy kind of tosses between the two. But I do have tickets to go see them in March 2021, and hopefully that will go ahead, but whether it will, I don't know. What else do I have about Do Nothing? Okay, the kind of music it is. Maybe I should have said that first. I think lyrically it's really interesting. They observe what's going on in the world and write about it in a really kind of almost poetic way. Not necessarily spoken word, but he really does have a way with words, like linguistically. It's very interesting the way that he writes, and it's very observational. And I think he takes inspiration from different characters. I know that LeBron James, there's a character from The Simpsons that he took a lot of influence from, who a character called Old Gil, who's a salesman, who I had to look up because it had been so long since I'd seen an episode with old Gil in it. He's definitely, I think, one of the sort of early characters of Simpsons. I don't think he's on it in the newer ones these days. So the music, the instrumentation, it's quite lo-fi at times, like LeBron James, that title track. Well, it's not even a title track, but that track that I knew them from. It's actually on side B on the record. That's quite lo-fi. It's quite, it's almost like, when you see them play it live in that Maida Vale studio session, it could almost be the recorded version. It's that kind of stripped back and like, it's like restrained. They're like, I don't know, they must hold themselves back so much when they're playing that because it's so restrained. Like they could they could really go for it, but they kind of just like controlling themselves not to, and it gives it this very sort of relaxed but still progressive feel. But not all their songs are that lo-fi. I'd say they definitely fit into the category of being like indie British alternative rock. And lyrically, I'd say it's verging on punk for sure because of the way they speak and the things that they speak about. Let's check if I have missed anything. Oh yeah, his stand-up comedian that he likes is Stuart Lee. I've actually seen Stuart Lee live. It was really good. Yeah, Stuart Lee was sick. So my favourite songs on this are all of them basically. Comedy Gold, New Life, Contraband, LeBron James, and Fitz. I just really like them all, to be honest. I don't have a favourite. I think every single song is great. Not a single skipper on there. No, not at all. But LeBron James will always have a soft spot in my heart because it was the first song of theirs I heard. The next EP is Radiohead, My Iron Lung, which when I bought this, I didn't even realise it was an EP. I thought it was an album. And, Radiohead had been a band I listened to a lot when I was, like, young, like, under 10 years old, like, very young. And then I hadn't listened to them for a few years, and then when I was, like, 15, 16, and I was like, I remember Radiohead being great. I want to sort of get back into them. This is what I ended up buying from HMV. It still has this sale sticker on it, $3.99 it was. Reduced from $8.99 it says there. And I really loved it. It took me years to realise that this was an EP and it wasn't an album. And I think it was only when I was like, how come My Iron Lung is on the Bends and on My Iron Lung? And I was confused by that, so I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's an EP. It's really quite dark and it's got some of my favourite songs on it, such as My Iron Lung, Lewis Mistreated, Lovesick, Sing Along, and The Trickster. And this came out just before the Bends did, so it was in that in-between phase. Which is probably why My Iron Lung ended up being re-recorded and put on the Bends. I found this EP very angsty, and it was, what I was going through at the time. I was a teenager, and it very much spoke to me. Radiohead, they're still one of my favourite bands. I just think they're brilliant. Really a British classic, so interesting and always striving to be, I don't know, not striving to be better, but they're always evolving, and I really love that about them. They're not afraid to evolve and to do something different. The next one is quite a recent one. Maybe not as recent as Do Nothing, no. It's Greta Van Fleet, who I have mentioned on my channel before, and I had a couple of you comment saying, thank you so much for mentioning Greta Van Fleet because they're now one of my favourite bands. And I love that. I love that because that's what music's all about, isn't it? Sharing it with people. So with Greta Van Fleet, this is their double EP, From the Fires. The reason it's called a double EP was because they originally released an EP called Black Smoke Rising, and that had, I think, 4 tracks on it, or 3, 4 tracks, and then they wanted to record a couple more songs and release those too, so they ended up combining those like 3 or 4 new songs with what was on Black Smoke Rising. And this is what they ended up with. So there's 8 tracks on here. A couple of them are covers, and that was another thing I was going to say about EPs, is that it's often kind of common that there might be some covers on an EP, which I really like. I think it says something about what that person and what that artist is going through at the time and how they feel, and you know the influence that's gone into their creativity over that period of time and when they wrote the songs that are on that EP. So I really like that. Greta Van Fleet, they are a band of 4, 3 of which are brothers, and one of which is a great friend of theirs, not a brother. Miles introduced me to Greta Van Fleet. I remember he came in one day and he said, I found this band I think you're really gonna like, and he showed me Highway Tune, which is I think my favourite song on this EP is Highway Tune, and I was like, oh, these guys are great. Ooh, I really like this. And they reminded me of Led Zeppelin, and of course they aren't Led Zeppelin, you know, no band will ever be Led Zeppelin ever again, but it reminded me of Led Zeppelin, and they're big fans of classic rock, and it's just a shame that I think a lot of Led Zeppelin fans and classic rock fans have sort of turned their backs on them and feel maybe that they're not authentic enough or something, but I don't know, I don't really care about that kind of stuff. Like, I just really like them, so I'm going to listen to them regardless. They're from Michigan, and I saw them play in Liverpool, when was it? End of 2019. I've got to say, I really didn't enjoy it. The band were good, however, the crowd were not nice at all. I had some really nasty experiences there, and I'd gone alone because I couldn't find anybody who wanted to go with me, so I actually ended up going alone. And yeah, it was just a very uncomfortable crowd. Really weird things happened, so that kind of tarnished it a little bit. But they were very good, and I'd happily go see them again, but I wouldn't go on my own ever again. My favourite songs on here are Safari Song, Flower Power, Highway Tune, Talk on the Street, and Black Smoke Rising. The covers that are on this album I'm not a big fan of, unfortunately, and I think for me it comes down to there's a fine line between classic rock and kind of that dad rock, and sometimes they verge a little bit too far onto dad rock for me, but most of their songs I really like. They do have a debut album out now called Anthem of the Peaceful Army. There's a couple of really good songs on there, so I'd highly recommend checking that out as well. So my next EP, I don't actually have. I would literally give anything to get a copy of this original EP, but there's a possibility I'll never be able to get it. So I'm really sad about that. I actually tried to find it so that I could show it to you in this video, but it's very, very hard to come by. And that is Arctic Monkeys, Beneath the Boardwalk. Now, I could spend an entire video talking about Arctic Monkeys, so I really need to try and rein it in and not go over the top too much and stick to my list of things I've got here that I'm going to say. So Beneath the Boardwalk, you know what, I'm going to hold this instead so that I've got something to tab, but it's not Beneath the Boardwalk, it's their other EP, which was Who the Fuck Are Arctic Monkeys, and it came after Beneath the Boardwalk. But I feel like I need to hold something for this ASMR video, otherwise it won't feel right. So Beneath the Boardwalk was a kind of very unofficial EP that Arctic Monkeys, really fans, put together, because they basically used to just record a couple of songs and then hand out the CDs for free at their gigs around Sheffield. And that was quite unheard of at the time, because honestly, when I went to gigs for like new bands during that era, they would always be selling their EPs and you'd have to buy them. I think it was very rare I got handed any for free. So that in itself was quite different. And basically fans kind of got all of them and put all the tracks together, and then, you know, made the sort of unofficial EP called Beneath the Boardwalk. And the Boardwalk was a venue in Sheffield that they used to play at quite regularly, and also Alex Turner used to work there as well. I have first heard about Arctic Monkeys from my friend Colette, who I'm still very good friends with. Her dad worked in Sheffield, and her dad got her a copy of it and brought it back. I think somebody gave it to him at work or something, and so she had a copy of it, and I first heard of them from her. And when Arctic Monkeys, like, they just caught fire during that time. Like, I just can't even explain it. It was just being a teenager then, and Arctic Monkeys coming about. They were just everything. Like, they were the indie band. Like, they were the pinnacle, the cornerstone of what British indie was at that era, at that time. And all the other bands were kind of like, how are these guys or these people going to measure up to Arctic Monkeys? Like, that's how I always felt at the time. So I never had Beneath the Boardwalk. I had downloaded it online because that's what fans were doing, and it wasn't illegal because they were never official recordings to begin with, and they were never being sold, and they never had monetary value to begin with. And that's how everybody across the north heard of Arctic Monkeys, was because it was all being shared online, their recordings, and that's how they got so much buzz in those early stages in the north. I can't speak for the south because I didn't live in the south, but in Manchester there was definitely a huge buzz about them, and Miles even says that in Sheffield he didn't even know the band, but he knew all the lyrics to Mardy Bum before he'd even heard the song, because people would just be singing it all the time. So he knew all the words, but he'd never heard it before. That is how far it went and how much buzz there was from the way that they'd, released all the tracks that are on the EP. And nobody'd really done that before, handing things out for free. I think Tom York, a couple of years beforehand, had released a solo album where he'd made it a choice. You could either buy it or you could download it for free. The consumer could decide what to do, and I think pretty much everybody downloaded it for free. So that was the only thing around that time I could think of that was kind of similar, that I knew about, you know. And then because of this, there was so much anticipation for their debut album to come out, and I think there was a lot of anticipation for this EP as well, because this came out after Beneath the Boardwalk and before their first album. Whatever People Say I Am is What I'm Not, which is such a mouthful. Even at the time I was like, this is a weird name for an album. Whatever People Say I Am, that's what I'm not. What else? What do I love about Arctic Monkeys? Lyrically, it's amazing. Alex Turner was obviously such an introspective, observational person from the very beginning, and I think he always had a way with words linguistically. He just writes incredible lyrics that have so much snap to them and really like very well articulated. They really like hit hard. And the things that they were talking about in these early songs were the things that I was experiencing at the time as well, being, you know, of a similar age, living in another northern town, experiencing similar things. And they were commenting on, you know, going to clubs, going to bars, what romance was like in this era, the fact that it felt like there was void of romance at the time. Like, they didn't really feel like there was romance there. That era really wasn't a romantic era. People didn't date in the UK. That was unheard of at the time. You either ended up being in a relationship with a friend, or you met someone on a night out, and that was it. Those were like the sort of main options. Or you meet someone at school or at university, and that was kind of it. People didn't like go on a date just to kind of get to know each other like we do now. But in the UK, that was like not common at all then. So it really sort of fits in with everything that was happening in the sort of youth culture at that time. So I'm going to hold this one. It's got a different texture. Still not the Beneath the Boardwalk EP. I had such a strong connection to Sheffield at that time anyway, because a friend of mine was at university there, so I used to go there quite often to see her and to spend the weekend and go out there. So I was already quite connected to Sheffield, and honestly, my love for the Arctic Monkeys, like when I first met Miles, because Miles is from Sheffield as well, and he was like, oh, I'm from Sheffield. I was like, ooh, Arctic Monkeys are from Sheffield. And honestly, it just like made me so excited to like go out with him, because he was from Sheffield and I really like Sheffield and I really liked Arctic Monkeys. So I feel like they've been a big part of my life. I saw them play in, what year was it? 2007. So it was after their second album had come out, Favourite Worst Nightmare. And it was a really good gig, but it was huge. It was at Lancashire Cricket Ground, so it was an outdoor gig. It was huge. So I wish I'd seen them when they were a bit smaller. And it was just really nice to listen to Beneath the Boardwalk and listen to those really early raw recordings again, and to see how different that they were, because some of the songs ended up on Whatever People Say It's What I'm Not. Some of them ended up on B-sides of singles, and honestly, like, quite a few of them have changed a lot when they've ended up on the B-side or ended up on the album. Like, completely different lyrics. Like Riot Van is a completely different song on Beneath the Boardwalk. If you're a big Arctic Monkeys fan and you've never listened to Beneath the Boardwalk, go ahead and listen to it. It is all on YouTube. I will leave the playlist linked below. It is amazing, and I think it will just be such a refreshing thing to listen to if you're a big fan and you've not heard Beneath the Boardwalk before. And interestingly, I know that they weren't very big in America until, when was it? I think it was after the album, the fourth album came out, AM. I may be wrong. If you're American and you know whether it was Humbug or AM, let me know. It was either the third or the fourth. It was either Humbug or AM. Not sure which one, but I think it's AM. But one of my favourite songs on here that didn't end up on anything as far as I'm aware is Space Invaders and Choo Choo. I don't think either of those songs ended up on any B-sides or any other albums, and I always really liked them, so I was always a bit gutted about that, but a lot of them did. Also, one thing you'll notice about Beneath the Boardwalk and the other EP, Who the Fuck Are Arctic Monkeys, but also the first album, is that it's a lot more bass heavy. Musically, it's a lot more bass driven, and the bass is quite prominent, and after that, when you get on the second album, the bass is not as prominent, and that's because the original bassist, called Andy Nicholson, he left the band after, I think it was the EP Who the Fuck Are Arctic Monkeys. He left the band after that, and after that the bass becomes less prominent because they changed bassists, and I think the new bassist kind of just leaves space for everything else to happen. He leaves space for, the guitar, the drums, the lyrics, the Alex. He leaves space for everything, so I think that's why bass isn't as prominent. But I'm a big fan of bass, strong, prominent bass. I love it, and for me that's a little bit of a shame, but I still love Arctic Monkeys. I honestly could do a whole video talking about Arctic Monkeys, and I'm literally probably a fan up to Suck It and See, which is like the fifth album. So yeah, if you want to see that video, let me know. There's probably only one of you out there who wants to see that video, but I will make it for you. Okay, I'm gonna have to speed up a little bit because this is a very long video now. So I ummed and ahed about including this, but I made this list. I've been making this list for a very long time, and sometimes you have to try and separate the artist from the person that they are. There's a lot of controversy about this band, Hanson, at the moment and amongst the fans. I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm just going to talk about this EP. So growing up, I was a huge fan of Hanson ever since Umbop 1996, and honestly, they've changed a lot over the years, musically, and they had major issues. So they did Umbop is the song that everybody knows. That was on the Middle of Nowhere album, and then they had another album called This Time Around that came out a couple of years after that, or maybe a few years after that, and then they had a hiatus for like years, so many years, like 6 years, something like that. And the reason was because the record company they were with, I think it was Island Records, they had rejected every single one of their new songs that they'd written. They must have written over 100 songs, and every single one had been rejected because it wasn't, commercial enough. It wasn't poppy enough. It wasn't like Umbop and their previous albums, Middle of Nowhere and This Time Around. It wasn't that sellable, youthful, poppy, commercial stuff anymore because they were adults by then. They were making different music. So they made the difficult decision, decided to leave Island Records and basically start their own record company so that they could release whatever they wanted. And this was the first EP that they released on their own record company called 3CG Records. I don't know if it's still called that. It might not be. And this is an acoustic album showcasing seven new songs and one song that we already knew. And it was recorded in a studio. Which studio was it? Church Studios and their own studios, 3CG studios. So it's got that kind of raw energy because it's a studio recording with a small audience, so you can hear the audience now and again. This is still hands down my favourite Hanson album ever, even though it's technically not an album, it's an EP. It's called Underneath Acoustic, and then a couple of years later they came out with Underneath Not Acoustic, well, the official album Underneath, but this is still my favourite. Because it's very raw. The songs feel very real. They're obviously very much on the surface for them as people, emotionally, creatively, and it was basically like them saying, this is who we are now, a kind of rebrand in a way, and so it's very honest, and very kind of in your face. It's very out there, even if you're not a Hanson fan at all, I would recommend giving it a listen. It is on YouTube. Give it a listen. It was on Spotify. No, it's not on Spotify. Because I remember I tried to find it. And it wasn't there. So I had to go and dig this out and put it in my CD player. So, favourites on here. Strong Enough to Break. When You're Gone. Underneath, the title song. Love Somebody to Know. They're my favourites. And then there's also a song called Hey on here, which was in Sabrina the Teenage Witch with Melissa Joan Hart. So not Netflix Sabrina with Kiernan Shipka. This is the old Sabrina with Melissa Joan Hart. They made an appearance in an episode of that and they played Hey. So yeah, I had to mention it, even though I'm not really listening to Hanson anymore. I had to mention it because it was on my list from a couple of years ago. So this next one is Ryan Adams. Again, a double EP. It's Love Is Hell Part 1, Love Is Hell Part 2. I'm going to just hold Love Is Hell Part 1 for now. Oh, that shine from the light. I'm so sorry. So, what happened here? So for me, these two EPs, I don't even know where to start. I loved them for a period of time because it's amazing music and I'd never listened to any Ryan Adams before. And it was a boyfriend I was with at the time who showed me, oh, you need to listen to this Ryan Adams. I thought he was talking about Bryan Adams. He wasn't. He was talking about Ryan Adams. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. Absolutely fell in love with both parts. Love Is Hell 1 and Love Is Hell 2. That was an awful relationship. And it was also an awful, very, very hard breakup. Then I didn't listen to Ryan Adams, these two EPs for, must have been 8 years, something like that. Even though I loved it so much, I just could not listen to it. And then I made a decision that I didn't want to stop myself listening to music that I really liked just because of, a very difficult breakup, and somebody who I hadn't seen in bloody 8 years. So I had a birthday coming around, so I asked my brother. He asked me what I wanted, and I said, I would like these two EPs by Ryan Adams, Love Is Hell 1 and 2. And I got my brother to buy it because I wanted to have a new connection to it. So now when I look at it, I think, oh, my brother bought me these. I don't think about the emotional trauma of when I first started listening to this music. However, there is one track on Love Is Hell Part 2 that I still cannot listen to, and I won't ever listen to again, I don't think. It was never one of my favourites anyway, but I really can't listen to it now. So, Ryan Adams, he was going through a breakup, I think, when he wrote all the tracks for these two EPs, and his record company thought that it was way too dark and it wasn't commercial enough and it wouldn't sell as an album. So they encouraged him. They absolutely insisted that he release it as EPs and that it cannot go on the proper album. So then he ended up writing the album Rock and Roll, I think it's called. In 2 weeks, he wrote that album and that's what they released. And then Love Is Hell Part 1 was released on the same day as Rock and Roll, and I think Love Is Hell Part 2 was released like a couple of days later. Ironically, they are really highly valued amongst his fans and music critics and stuff. The EPs have both been very, very successful, and they've subsequently been re-released as one whole album, like an official album, and not EPs anymore. It's funny is that they both have bonus tracks on them, and that's unusual for an EP. Like I said in I think earlier in this video, is that an EP is usually like it's usually a few tracks, 5, 6, something like that. These are solid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 track albums with 2 bonus tracks on both albums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, on both albums. It's incredible. That is a massive amount of music on an EP, and it just bothers me about what record companies can be like. It's like, it's incredible music and there's a lot of it. You got 10 tracks per EP, and they rejected it and said it couldn't be an album. Really bothers me, that. My favourite tracks on Love Is Hell 1 is House Is Not For Sale, Love Is Hell itself, World War 24, and there's a cover on here. You know how we spoke earlier about there being cover songs on EPs sometimes, and it is Wonderwall by Oasis. I'm from Manchester, if you didn't know. Most of you probably do know I'm from Manchester. Oasis were also from Manchester. Wonderwall was a massive song when I was growing up. Oasis for me were everything. When I was under 10 years old, for many, many years, I was a huge Oasis fan. And I think it was the first time I really got a sense of my identity as of being a Mancunian. I'd not really thought about it so deeply before, but Oasis really it awoke that in me and really made me understand what identity means, really, and what it can mean for somebody, of sort of multi-heritage background, growing up in Britain and being genetically Indian, and what that means, having those 2 influences. So for me, listening to Ryan Adams' cover song of Wonderwall, I think it's a great cover. However, I don't know, it's not the original, so I don't really enjoy listening to it. However, it is a great cover, I will say that. Okay, so Love Is Hell 2. My favourite songs on here: My Blue Manhattan, City Rain, City Streets, English Girls Approximately, Thank You Louise, and Hotel Chelsea Nights. And I think Hotel Chelsea Nights, he wrote that while he was staying at the Hotel Chelsea. I'm not sure if he wrote both EPs while he was living at the Hotel Chelsea, but I think there's a significant amount of time when he was writing these that he was staying at the Hotel Chelsea. I've just read in my notes now that Wonderwall was actually released as a single in the UK. And I'm not sure how well it did, but it was released as a single in the UK. Honestly, it still makes me feel weird when I listen to these 2 albums because of, the memories of when I first started listening to these 2 albums, but I just got sick of it. I was like, I don't want to not listen to music that I love just because of something, difficult that happened to me. And in a way, that's sort of the journey of music, isn't it? Is that you have some connection to it for a reason, whether it's the time in your life or how it made you feel or something you were going through at the time. That's what music is. So I didn't want to stop myself from listening to it anymore. Okay, this is the last one now, and it is another record, 12-inch. Might just get a nice little thumbnail while we're here. This is probably a really obvious choice, and if it is, please leave me a comment and tell me, oh my god, I can't believe you chose that. Because it is an obvious choice, I think, anyway. So this is the Beta Band, or the Beta Band, however you want to say it. That's Beta. And this is the 3 EPs, and that's what it's called, the 3 THREE EPs. And it's actually a compilation album of 3 EPs that they had made. I first came across the Beta Band in a film which I'm sure you know of if you know this album, and that was in High Fidelity, the John Cusack High Fidelity, John Cusack and Jack Black. There is a bit where they're in the record store, and I don't know if you've seen High Fidelity, but it's about somebody who owns and runs a record store, and he is it's a busy day in the record store, and then he says to one of the other employees, he says, I'm now about to sell 5 copies of the 3 EPs by the Beta Band, and then he puts it on, and then everybody in the store's like, yeah, and then he sells, however many copies of the 3 EPs. Anyway, I was like the person watching it going, oh yeah, what's this song? As if I was in the record store, So that's when I first sort of heard of them and started listening to them. I fell in love with them straight away because it's such interesting music. It's hard to describe. I think they call themselves like folk electronic or folk psych or something like that, but there's a lot of folk involved lyrically and instrumentally, but there's also quite a lot of electronic music, like samples, synthesizers. Oh, samples? Yeah, there's some samples. Synthesizers, abstract noise. I'm not a composer or a musician, so sometimes the descriptions are really tough for me. But yeah, very, very interesting band. If you've never heard any of their stuff, I would recommend checking out the 3 EPs. So let's just have a look at the inside, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. It's got this photograph in there. I'm not sure who that is. I assume it's one of them, but honestly I don't know what any of them look like. And one of them, John McLean, who was the keyboardist and DJ electronic side of the music, he's now a film director, and I've seen one of his films called Slow West. Absolutely loved it. It's like one of my favourite films of the, post 2000s. He's a really good director now. But yeah, let's tell you a little bit more about this. So they had 3 EPs. One was called Champion Versions, the next was called The Patty Patty Sound, and the last was called Los Amigos del Beta Bandidos. And they then, I think it was the 20th anniversary, they put them together and released them as one, which is this. And I think John McLean did this artwork as well. They are a Scottish band. I'm not sure if all members are Scottish, but I'm pretty sure that the majority are, if not all. They used to tour with Radiohead in the early days. I think they did multiple tours opening for Radiohead. Radiohead gave them a lot of clout, not sure what the right word would be. It makes me feel very relaxed, their music, but also energised at the same time. It's a very interesting combination. My favourites on this EP album is Dry the Rain, House Song, and She's the One. So I'd highly recommend giving that a listen to, but I'm sure you probably have already heard it if you've clicked on this video and you're thinking about EPs, so you probably already heard it, but highly recommend if you do. Look, there's a little bee over there, I think John McLean did this artwork. Very interesting. Quite a multi-talented man, it seems. Film director, musician, DJ, artist. He can do it all. I'd love to know what your favourite EPs are. Leave me a comment and tell me what your favourite EPs or albums are. It'd be great to sort of share and start a discussion and see what you guys like as well. So I hope you enjoyed this EP's video. I'm sorry it is so long, although you might enjoy it being so long. I haven't done a long rambly video for quite some time now. If you have any requests for videos, leave them down below in the comments. Remember, subscribe, check if you are subscribed. And I think you really do need to turn on the bell notification, because a friend of mine who's a subscriber, she said my videos hadn't come up in her subscription box at all, so she had to turn the bell on in order to actually get them to show up in the subscription box. So I'd hate to have you miss my videos if you really want to watch them. So please do turn that on so it always comes up for you in your subscription box, and leave a like and a comment, and I'll see you in the next video.